What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we've seen a lot of excitement in the PC gaming handheld space over the last couple of years, especially with the Valve Steam Deck. And now it appears Asus is making their own big push with a handheld that had hands-on time recently, as well as another showcase to look forward to. We're going to go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be taking a look at a new discovery from Nintendo themselves that gives us a bit more insight into their cross-platform plans for the next generation device. And we'll also be taking a look at Microsoft and their latest financial report, showing some pretty massive declines in Xbox hardware, but the software appearing to pick up the slack. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. We're gonna start today with Microsoft and that Activision Blizzard deal just feels like it's never going to end. Well, if that's you, I have good news. It seems like it's going to be wrapping up here pretty soon. We can see this posted up by the New York Post, who says Microsoft preparing to close Activision deal despite FTC suit. And according to their own sources, even though the FTC is putting up quite the front against this entire acquisition going through, them suing, requesting a lot of information, even going to Nintendo looking for something, it looks like Microsoft is expecting the CMA to approve the deal. We'll have to see what kind of concessions, if any, because we're starting to see more and more regulatory bodies approve this with no concessions. And if that's the case with the CMA, according to one of their own sources, the New York Post, they say they're going to cram this down the FTC's throats. Seems like Microsoft is just done playing around here, right? They're ready to get this deal to go through because they want to obviously use Call of Duty with marketing, and Diablo 4 is coming up, and the slew of Activision Blizzard back catalog of games that can just go right into Game Pass. And then, oh yeah, they also would have King and Candy Crush and the mobile side. There's a lot there that they would like to get in motion, so I think they're going to have this thing closed out by next month. And if they have to go into June, that will be coming up right against their deadline that they had previously promised that month. So that's what I'm thinking. I feel like after the CMA approves it, it's just a couple of weeks and they'll try to close this thing out despite the FTC really putting up that opposition. Also, in the PlayStation 5 generation thus far, we've seen Insomniac games absolutely deliver for Sony, and it looks like they just keep growing and growing. As we can see this posted up over on PSU, says Insomniac Games, the studio responsible for the critically acclaimed Marvel Spider-Man and Ratchet & Clank franchises, has revealed on its LinkedIn profile that the company has grown to over 520 employees. Now, we are expecting them to showcase Spider-Man 2 most likely next month when that alleged showcase is happening, and set that up for a fall or maybe holiday release on the PlayStation 5. And then, oh yeah, they'll have Wolverine up next. So Insomniac continues to deliver, but wow, 520 employees. Insomniac has certainly grown quite a bit over the past couple of years, and obviously them prepping some big time titles of Spider-Man and Wolverine, then who knows? I'm sure there's other stuff they'd like to do even after that. So as I mentioned, Insomniac, I think, has been the best studio for Sony so far in the PlayStation 5 generation, and doesn't look like they're slowing down anytime soon. Oh, and I had mentioned this yesterday when it comes to Jedi Survivor, but you can see this posted up by EA Star Wars, who says, no spoilers, we're beyond excited for everyone to experience Star Wars Jedi Survivor this week. We ask that you please be mindful of others and avoid posting or sharing spoilers. Remember, BD is watching. Fortunately, we're not too far off, but yeah, the thing has broken street date, and I see more and more posts going up with spoilers for story, but also, we'll say, different things you get in the game, powers, items, all of that, right? So be careful out there because there are screenshots and videos posting up just on Twitter. You'll just be scrolling and there it is. And if it finds its way into a trending hashtag, good luck, because Twitter just really wants to recommend that to you. So here's hoping everyone out there who's been looking forward to this can get to Friday without being spoiled and start playing. And I'm excited to jump into this one, but yeah, just look out. Spoilers are popping up quite a bit. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Asus and their new handheld. They had revealed this previously, but there was so much information we didn't have about the device, like the specifications, some of its abilities, pricing. These are all things that are pretty important for this device. And now we have quite a bit of that information minus one big thing, but you can see this posted up over on Twitter. This from the ROG Global account saying, the wait is almost over. We are thrilled to announce that we'll be unveiling our ROG Ally specifications, availability, and pricing on May 11th at 10 a.m. Eastern. So that's basically that their launch is what they're doing here, and they just have a link to say save the date for YouTube and Twitch. They're really building this whole thing up for that May 11th reveal and I guess release at that time. But something that went alongside of all of the mayhem here with ROG was that AMD unveiled some of the chips that will be inside of this system, the Ryzen Z1 and the Z1 Extreme chips. And these are very impressive. I talked about some of my more in-depth thoughts over on SpawnWave Plus, the second channel, so check that out if you're more curious about some of the inner workings here. But essentially there are two chips, and you can kind of see the chart that they put up here with the Z1 Extreme topping out at 8.6 teraflops. And the best part, you can see the switch is the little bar all the way to the left, 0.4 teraflops, and it gets better. Their source is Wikipedia. Don't really know why they needed to say Wikipedia for the source, but there you have it. They want to, of course, do the comparison to the most popular kind of handheld console out there, being the Switch, the one that obviously everyone knows. But then you also had some different performance charts that, again, you want to take these with a grain of salt because they're going to make it look as good as possible. However, this is a very impressive chip. According to Asus, though, the ROG Ally will be able to match the overall power draw of the Steam Deck and still put out 50% more performance. And this sentiment was pretty much echoed across the internet for all these different previews. You have Engadget saying Asus ROG Ally hands-on, possibly the most powerful handheld gaming PC yet, boasting that 7-inch 1080p display at 120 hertz refresh rate. And based on some of those charts that we saw, think about games that aren't as graphically intensive, yeah, you should be punching above 60 FPS pretty consistently for some of those titles, which means you will take advantage of that 120 hertz refresh rate. So good to hear, because I was kind of confused why we had that in the first place, but I was also thinking more in line with what we have with the Steam Deck, where you're probably not going to be topping that 60 FPS most of the time. And while there was a lot of praise to go around for the ROG Ally with the hands-on time, there are still a lot of questions. The biggest one being the price. And according to Asus, through a spokesperson, it will definitely be below $1,000, which is what everyone was kind of hoping for in the first place. So that means $999.99. Now, I think this would be a good device coming in at the $800 level for the base model, because I do believe you'll have better models. Like, there'll probably be a couple different SKUs based on most likely storage capacity, but also maybe you have like the base Z1, maybe they have one that's a bit more beefed up as Z1 Extreme and so on there. Although, based on the power draw that they're quoting for the Z1 Extreme when it's in turbo mode, probably an hour or less. That was the other big thing that wasn't brought up. And I think these are very purposeful, because they're not going to look as great on paper when you say, oh yeah, you're getting less than an hour of battery life, but you get 70 frames in Red Dead Redemption 2, and the whole thing costs you north of $1,000. But I think a base model coming in below that $1,000 mark, hopefully around $800, and having a battery life that's similar to the Steam Deck while performing just overall better, as they mentioned, about 50%. Yeah, I think there will be a lot of people interested in this system, myself included, and yeah, I'll be trying to pick one of these up and we can tear it down and talk about some of the performance metrics on it. So look towards May 11th, as they're going to have this big showcase, launch event, the whole deal, and then we'll find out exactly how much this thing costs. Next up, let's talk about an interesting situation that's going on with Metacritic, mostly because they actually responded around it, and this has to do with review bombing for user scores, which has been going on forever now. It feels like if a game comes out and there's any kind of controversy, it's probably going to hit with 0s and 10s than trying to even it out. And it's so obvious that most of the people who are doing that probably haven't even played the game necessarily. They just want to leave a message or just try to lower the score for, I don't know, some reason. But we're seeing this right now with Horizon Burning Shores. In fact, the review scores themselves on the user side got down to like a 3, which that's pretty low. The game itself is good, Forbidden West, and then Burning Shores, I think, adds on quite a bit and kind of gives us that glimpse as to what the PlayStation 5 can do and hopefully will do with the third game. I'm specifically talking about the final hour or so, we'll say, of Burning Shores. But there is this response from Metacritic to Eurogamer. We can see this posted up, where they say, fandom is a place of belonging for all fans, and we take online trust and safety very seriously across our sites, including Metacritic. Metacritic is aware of the abusive and disrespectful reviews of Horizon Forbidden West Burning Shores, and we have a moderation system in place to track violations of our terms of use. We are currently evolving our processes and tools to introduce stricter moderation in the coming months. And as I mentioned, this has been going on for a while with user scores just being review bombed, or even just getting 10s thrown at it constantly, trying to raise it up. It's a mess, and it ends up being a place you really can't go for any useful information. And you figure that's the idea of Metacritic in the first place, is to give you some sort of useful information to determine if you should buy a game or not. I feel like user scores are a good place to talk about maybe issues you've had with your overall personal experience with it, maybe with a PC configuration that you have with a CPU and a GPU, and it's not working that well here because of this. Instead, you just have people arguing back and forth and kind of treating it like a mini message board almost, with a score attached to it. It just breaks down into chaos. I'm not really sure what they're going to exactly be able to do. Can they have people verify that they've played a couple hours of the game at least? Because that's the other big thing, is most people leaving these scores haven't even played the game at all. Maybe you link your Nintendo account or your Xbox account or your PlayStation account or Steam to it, and it can see if you've played it, and then it unlocks the ability to leave a score. There's a lot of hangups, I think, with this overall situation. But for the most part, I think we look at user scores as really not meaning that much, especially when it breaks down into just chaos of 0s and 10s getting thrown around all over the place. Next up, let's talk about an interesting discovery that was made from Nintendo themselves in a job listing. And I know there's been a lot of talk around Switch 2 and next generation Nintendo systems and all of this. And there's been some stuff that's been out there that's kind of questionable. Is it worth talking about? Is it not? And for the most part, I err on the side of just really not talking about it at this point. But this in particular is interesting because it more or less talks about the idea of cross-platform support for different games and services. And that's something that's come up quite a bit. Will this next device be backwards compatible with the current Switch? Well, there is a job listing you can see that was posted up. This is from Nintendo European Research and Development, or NERD for short. It's a job offer, game technologies, R&D engineer, and scientist. The thing that was pointed out here, and this was first spotted by DocTrey81 on YouTube, under the position responsibilities, you have cross-platform development as well as high-performance implementation. Now, the position focuses more specifically on cross-platform development, but people still noticed high-performance implementation, low-level optimization, C++ development, real-time rendering, etc. But to see them mention game engine architecture, cross-platform development, network programming, and interactions with large code bases, all of that alongside that cross-platform development, certainly raised some eyebrows. And if you look at NERD's site, they do go over some of the different things they've done for Nintendo. And the big thing you're going to notice is they're heavily involved with the emulation side of things. So, for example, you look at the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection. Well, those games are running on forms of emulation like Mario Sunshine. In fact, NERD developed the Nintendo GameCube emulation technology used in that game. They've also worked on the N64, the Sega Mega Drive for the Nintendo Switch Online. And while the N64 side started out rough, it's certainly cleaned up quite a bit. And on the Mega Drive side, it's been great. Super Nintendo doing the same thing there, and they'll also work on some odd things like, for example, they developed the several key enabling features for Ring Fit Adventure. The biggest thing I'm looking at, though, is because this is NERD talking about cross-platform support, which obviously is talking about their next generation device, I think it's pretty clear that Nintendo Switch Online will indeed continue on to the next device. Not just talking about your account system like, oh, you sign in and it still has your reward points or something. I think it's pretty obvious at this point that the Nintendo Switch Online, when it comes to Nintendo 64, Super Nintendo, Nintendo Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, all that will follow along to where you download the app and all the games will be there, and hopefully all of your save data as well. Now, there's still the question of backwards compatibility with physical cartridges. I kind of am leaning towards now that they will do that. It'll just maybe be keyed slightly different for the newer cartridges, but I think it would be strange for Nintendo to walk away from all the games they've released now on the Switch and not have it set up for their next device, even based on history, DS to 3DS, Game Boy to Game Boy Advance, etc. I'm just starting to come around more and more to the side of it's going to be 99% backwards compatible with the things that aren't, like Labo stuff, that, that kind of thing that relies on the shape of the current Switch. But there you have it, nerd looking around for someone to do cross-platform support for a newer device and most likely for that Nintendo Switch Online application. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Microsoft and their recently released financial data. This covers Q3, which is basically the first 3 months of 2023, and we'll kind of go over top to bottom, but I am mostly interested in the gaming side of things. So starting off, the overall revenue of the company, $52.9 billion. That's with a B, billion dollars. For that first quarter of 2023, again, Q3 for them, that's up 7% over last year's Q3. Operating income, $22.4 billion, that's up 10%. Net income, $18.3 billion, up 9%. Cloud revenue, $22.1 billion, up 16%. And then we get to the gaming side of things. This is kind of interesting because Xbox content and services revenue, up 3%. Xbox hardware was down 30%, but the gaming revenue overall was only down 4%. In fact, that actually beats expectations. Expectations were actually lower than that it would drop more, but because the content and services revenue was stronger than expected, it actually seemed to pick up some of the slack for Xbox hardware that 30% down. That's not good no matter how you slice it. Now, according to Microsoft, because they did do follow-ups with Q&A and all of this, Game Pass actually grew, but the hardware, they still say is supply limited, or at least they had more supply this time last year than they do right now. And I've seen some people who are really in the know with Xbox mention that it has to do with the cloud side of things, as in they're standing up all these different blades and servers that would use those chips for Xbox Series X, for example. And instead of sending them out to retailers, they're using them in these data centers. They're focusing heavily right now on cloud. And I guess in their mind, if they don't have the big first-party games coming out over the last year and a half, why are they pushing a ton of systems out there and flooding the market? I guess that makes sense, but still, you feel like you don't want to be down 30% when you're 2.5 years into the generation. Anyway, despite all of this, it does look like this $3.59 billion in quarterly Xbox sales is the second best Q3 ever behind last year, this according to Dom's Playing. And the 30% drop for hardware doesn't look great on paper, but interestingly enough, just Microsoft, as they are a services company, continues to do well on the services side. And I am thinking, okay, they've gone through this really slow period in terms of big first-party releases. When that picks up and they acquire Activision Blizzard, I think this time next year, we'll probably be looking at a completely different Microsoft on the gaming side. At least that's kind of the hope at this point, because we do still need Microsoft to be strong to be up against Sony and yes, Nintendo. So I'm still thinking they'll continue to grow, especially after this Activision Blizzard deal closes, and we'll see, especially going into the holiday. My big thing now is looking towards Redfall to see how that comes out, but then definitely Starfield. It's not make or break for Xbox, but I think it's about time they get that win, so we'll see. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask if you are not currently a Game Pass subscriber, would the inclusion of all Activision Blizzard games in the service, including day one releases, make you interested in signing up? Well, there's 36% say yes, 64% say no, and that's actually not bad. In fact, that's what Microsoft is looking for. Oh, if we get Activision Blizzard, will we get a large segment of gamers who would not subscribe, just maybe sign up, especially when things like Call of Duty or Diablo or, again, that back catalog goes in. And that's going to be a big thing for them with Activision Blizzard, is putting the marketing on some of these games, especially Call of Duty, because there's a large mainstream audience out there that's not necessarily plugged into the internet or talking about all this stuff constantly, that may just see Call of Duty and Xbox next to each other. Game Pass, I just need that and I get all these Call of Duty games. Yeah, I'll sign up for that and I'll get an Xbox. Or I'll sign up and I don't know, play through the cloud, although Call of Duty on the cloud is still kind of sketchy. So maybe they will just buy an Xbox or play it on their PC. But we'll see what happens after this Activision Blizzard deal closes again. I'm thinking next month it gets done. And then we head towards the holiday with Call of Duty and an Xbox logo next to it on store shelves. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Ryan, who says, so for Guerrilla, the next new project after potentially finishing the Horizon series is going to be when? Like 10 years. It's crazy when you have to wait that long for a game to come out, even though the IP is owned by the platform holder and they have a roster of studios. So I would expect the third Horizon game to kind of close out the trilogy to happen towards the end of the PlayStation 5's life, which then means maybe Guerrilla will show up with, hey, maybe a Killzone game for the next system. It's going to be a while. These games do take a long time to make. I guess the one benefit they have is that they've made Burning Shores, they've made Forbidden West and Zero Dawn, so they already have like the lore and probably assets and animations they can pull from, maybe to speed up development. But I'm thinking this third Horizon game is going to be kind of like a swan song, if you will, for the PlayStation 5. So that's just kind of where we are now. And then they'll have that live service Horizon game that will probably be supported throughout this generation into the next one. So for now, unless there's a massive surprise, Guerrilla's mostly a Horizon studio. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's the Asus ROG Ally? Are you interested in picking one of those up? Depending on the price, of course. Then also, what about this nerd job listing? Do you think this is pointing towards full backwards compatibility, or at the very least, Nintendo Switch Online following us over to the next platform with the Game Boy Advance, Nintendo 64 apps, and so on? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.